Welcome to the Side Action Podcast, the sports gambling show that covers everything in the world of sports betting from A through Z. We'll cover the four major sports, as well as anything and everything in between worth some action, and will increase the size of your bankroll. And here we go.
All right, welcome to the Side Action, episode 96, episode 27 of season 3. I'm Jim Weglars, a.k.a. Wegs. You can follow me at Wegspool on Twitter and Instagram.
And I'm Steve Roberts. You can follow me on Twitter at 31sroberts.
Follow the podcast at Side Action Pod on Twitter and also on YouTube. So, Action, before we get to our big guest here, how was your weekend? You've been faring pretty well, it looks like, over the weekend. We obviously did well as a team here, but you've been rolling some serious futures here.
Yeah, I had a pretty good weekend in the books. Saturday was a little bit in the red, but made some back on Sunday with some of our picks. Michigan State came through with a big victory.
They did.
And otherwise started the week off pretty hot, too, with some of these smaller conference tournaments. So it was good. And yourself?
I've been getting back. I had a crazy week, as I mentioned last week, with a friend who was leaving town. She finally got out of town, so I wasn't partying all night like I did 3 times last week.
Mm-hmm.
I was able to sleep the whole night for once, so I feel a little bit better. But, other than that, obviously we've been doing really good the last 2 weeks in picks, so I'm really excited for our Vegas trip next week. So hope we can carry that over.
Yeah, no doubt about that.
That's awesome. Well, let's jump into it. We got a special guest here. We got Mr. Cola here. He is a new venture. He's been on the podcast. This is our 3rd year, right, Cola?
Yeah.
I think it's our 3rd year.
This is my 4th appearance because I did one before NFL football in 2019 as well. So
this guy, he's our
3rd time talking about college basketball.
Yeah, our most regular visitor here. but we wanted to let you get an opportunity as he's got a very cool backdrop, better than ours for sure, to talk about his new venture called eFantasy. So I'll let you take over.
Yes. So eFantasy, if I were to boil it down, is a new way to score fantasy football. If I'm taking just from a very high level view. So right now, regular fantasy football will be stats times a multiplier. You get fantasy football points. You take 2 teams, they play each other in that way, and you get a winner. So it's basically a math equation, if you want to say it that way. eFantasy football is completely different in that you take the actual plays that each one of the players played in the game. You take all of the plays for those players, and then there is a fantasy game that happens between the 2 teams. You kick off on 1st and 10 from the 25-yard line like a regular football game, and then you're just taking there's a computer code that matches the fantasy situation with the real plays and picks the play that is the most similar to that situation, executes it, and then it advances the game. Now you've got 2nd and whatever, maybe if they gained 5 yards on the first play, it'll be 2nd and 5 from the 30-yard line, and the whole game will play out like that with no interaction or no input from anybody. It's just literally the computer code running through all of the plays, and you can actually then create kind of a tapestry of a game that you could view, that you could analyze, you can look back on. So it's really just a new way to experience fantasy football. And then there's a whole bunch of interesting and fun ways that you can then interact with that. And that's kind of what I did over the 2020 season, where we actually did a proof of concept season. And then, I can go into a whole bunch of iterations of how it can go down. But the way that I then am trying to pitch this is a new way that can be more inclusive for all kinds of fans. Because if we have a game where the teams are managed by other people other than ourselves, and instead we're just, kind of like picking teams that we want to win that week. So all of the drafting, the managing, all of that is done by others. And then the way that you play it is just by picking the teams that you think are going to win. And that could even be picking the teams that, you like Patrick Mahomes. You pick the team that has Patrick Mahomes, you root for them, and you can play a season that way. And you can actually play it then. People that love NFL football but maybe don't want to get into all of the time that it takes to know the players, draft the team, manage it from week to week, you can actually then participate and engage with fantasy football without actually knowing everything about it. You can just pick the teams. And one of the things I did with this proof of concept season was I had a bunch of fantasy analysts. Sigmund Bloom from Football Guys, who's my favorite analyst, actually played, which was really cool. John Daigle from Roto-World, now it's NBC Sports Edge. Chris Allen, a couple of really massive names in fantasy football played along. But then my mom was in the league as well, so she played with these fantasy football analysts, and my mom was actually able to play. You'll have to see. We're in week 4 right now over on YouTube. The eFantasy Football channel on YouTube is where the games are actually broadcast. And what I'm doing right now is going week by week and putting out a video that is kind of an animation of the game. So, I make these little fantasy football cartoons where you can actually watch the game that happened, week 1 through week 16.
Right.
I know that typically E in front of a word stands for electronic, like email, but I know in your case it might stand for something different. I think you touched on it. Can you elaborate?
So the E actually stands for so many different things. If I'm going to pick one, obviously you can't just make it stand for everything, but I like with some of the marketing that I've done, like to make it stand for all kinds of things: experiential, evolution of fantasy football, electrifying fantasy football, and entertaining fantasy football, electrifying fantasy football. I can make this E. I've got a whole list of all the things that the E can stand for. But the one that I think is the most powerful is fantasy football for everyone. Everyone can play. It's an absolutely inclusive way to play with your kids, your spouse, your parents, your grandparents. It really doesn't matter. Anybody who loves NFL football can enjoy this, be entertained by it, and can be included in it. And if you look at how many people are NFL football fans, identify as NFL football fans, and then you look at how many players play fantasy football, it's an absolute chasm. We think of the fantasy football industry as a really thriving industry, and it is. It's making a lot of money. There's a lot of people that are involved. But there's a massive chasm between how many players are playing and how many people love the NFL. It's something like over 75% of people that love the NFL don't play fantasy football. So I really feel like this is a way that we could kind of bridge that gap a little bit and get people included that don't want to, take the time and don't want to, all of the barriers of entry to playing fantasy football.
Mm-hmm.
So I've seen the YouTube, animation part, but so what's the plan on getting people involved? Well, let's say if I wanted to do it with my buddies, or how does that work? How would we, or is there a plan for how you're rolling it out?
Yeah, so I'm still developing the plan right now for 2021. I do want to make it a way that people can play. The way that it is right now is there are 6 teams that are managed by other people, and actually Steve managed one of the teams, and actually the bad guys, breaking news right now, the big reveal. But he actually managed that team throughout the season, which was really, really cool that he would do that, and hopefully he had fun doing it.
Yeah.
It was a grind weekly, that's for sure. But the way that I see this is that those teams are the teams that everybody who's playing fantasy football is engaging and rooting for, and the rosters are set for all of those teams. And then what you would do is you would have a team of you and 5 other people. Mm-hmm. And again, this can be children, anyone can play it. Literally, if you can look at a team and be like, oh, I really like, Nick Chubb, that's the team I want to pick this week, or whatever it is. Mm-hmm. Or you can be, as detailed as how fantasy football gets. The way that this league was ran this year was that randomly each week someone got to pick first. They got to pick the team that they wanted to represent them, and then the second person got to pick any other team except for the one that got picked. And you would go all the way through, and you would have a team that everybody in your league had one team that they were rooting for, and so then you would be pitted against a particular, someone else in your league, and maybe you've got the bad guys versus Caterpillar Jones. So that's the game that really matters to you for that week. So you and your friends would have your own standings of what your record is, and then the standings and records in the playoff hunt for the 6 teams that everyone's watching then would be the same for everybody.
I gotcha. And, I guess you were talking about bridging the gap, but how did you come up with this idea? When did I know it's probably been years in the making, so what was the impetus to get this thing started?
I honestly have had this idea in my head for a very long time. I want to say probably 3 or 4 years ago. In 2018, I was actually on the treadmill. And I was listening to Sigmund Bloom speak with Paul Charchian, who is major in the fantasy football industry. He does guillotine leagues, so he's got his own spin-off of a really interesting game type. They were talking the whole podcast about different interesting game types, and I was sweating not from the working out, but from the what if they just say this thing that I've been talking about for such a long time. And that feeling that I had in myself was kind of like this catalyst to reach out to my brother. Do you know a patent attorney? Because I knew my brother had has a couple of patents on like not fantasy football things and like real work things. And so I reached out to him, talked to him, to his patent attorney, and by the following February 2019, I had a provisional patent in place, and then started the work to just try to figure out what I was even doing. That the cartoon or the animation that you see now, the very first one that I created was just a picture of what the plays look like. And the very first game that I ever did was on Excel, where I just hand picked all, I matched up the situation to the game situation, and just picked the best play without knowing what the result was, and then played it and then did the next one. And it took me a massive amount of time. So, then fast forward a year, I got the full patent application last February, and then started with the process of reaching out to people in the industry. Everyone that I reached out to had such great things to say. I talked to Sigmund Bloom on the phone twice, and just the things that you could hear his wheels turning about the possibilities of this, and how and then when he agreed to actually play, that was great. That was a really big boost, considering how much he does during his regular season, in fantasy football. It's a crazy grind. And so then I worked with a coder that was able to, we worked through uploading all of the plays and how it would work. And, I'm really pleased with how it turned out. The fact that we were actually able to create games at the click of a button, and really work out how this process would go and how we could do a season. And now I'm looking at how we can do a full season, and we can do the animations during the week, and we can get a winner. Games happen Sunday, Monday, and we have a winner on Wednesday. So that's the goal here for 2021, so that we can actually do a season where people can play along, be interested, and engage with it.
Cool.
And that's great because it keeps that the tick of the week going, right? So you've got the regular games,
you need
then
that.
You've got the eFantasy games going into the week, and then you do it again.
But here's my question: what do you do on Wednesday in fantasy football?
Waivers?
Nothing. Waivers are done.
Thursdays, yeah.
You check your
There's
waivers.
Nothing.
Check them on Wednesday morning. That's all.
It's eFantasy day, guys.
Yeah.
Sure.
Come on.
Well,
You don't do anything on Wednesday.
I, for one, I told you this in the past, I know personally, but the amount of thought and computer programming that went into this is just incredible. And I remember back to freshman year coding class, and you and I were sitting there, and I think it's impressive. So kudos to you.
So
I really enjoyed it as well.
So I wrote most of all of the logic, mostly because I wanted that to be kind of bulletproof in the patent. So I wanted all of the logic to be there exactly so you could fully understand what I was talking about. And but my buddy Brian Bross, shout out, is the one that actually coded everything. We worked, I think we got together every Thursday night virtually, of course, because of everything that was going on. And, worked through this entire thing, and he did an amazing job. And, it turned out really, really good. And I love watching. I just put out some videos here today, actually, for week 4. And I tried to include in this week's videos where I showed actually what the fantasy situation was and then what the real play was. So you can see how similar these are, because it really is impressive when you've got a 3rd and 5 from the 30-yard line. This was actually from the video today. From Slime City versus the Hooray Heroes. 3rd and 5, 30-yard line, end of game. Matt Ryan has a 3rd and 5 from the 30-yard line, the exact same spot of the field, same situation. And then you get whatever happened. This particular play, you got a 12-yard completion, and so we got a first down. You're not talking about in regular fantasy football where you can get first downs and you score a touchdown by getting the ball, enough yards to get into the end zone. it's real football in fantasy form. So I'm really excited for it. And, it's going to evolve past my little animations that I make. But I am an expert on PowerPoint animations now. So as you can tell,
Yeah.
Pixar level it.
I love it. Well, tell us again where to find the videos now on YouTube, and then if you can tell us your Twitter handle that I like a lot.
Right. So you can find the videos on the eFantasy Football channel on YouTube. So they're uploaded every Wednesday for the new games. So eFantasy Football channel on YouTube. My logo looks something like this. My little football stitches fell off because I drink so much out of this, drink water out of this so much. And my handle on Twitter is @eFantasyShowman. So it's a little bit of a tip to the fact that I get in front of my camera and I announce a animated football game like it's the most important thing in the entire world, because to me it actually is the most important thing in the world, other than my 3 sleeping kids, my beautiful wife, my dog, I guess. But and then I also have a landing page, which is just efantasy.football. That's simple. That's all it is. efantasy.football. You can go in, leave your information if you want to know about the newest developments in the 2021 season.
Excellent.
Cool. We'll definitely provide those links in the show notes for those of you out there listening, and probably the YouTube upload as well. If you want to check out eFantasy, we'll have them right there for you.
Yeah, Steve, I have one more thing I want to say.
Sure.
Also, like, the sky is the limit with this idea. So what I have going on right now is what's going on now, but there's no reason why in however many years it couldn't be that we all have our own teams that we manage, and we, have our own animations, and it's all done so that we have our own games, and, obviously computing power, the way that we can program things. The sky's the limit, honestly, in what this could be. So this is how we're rolling it out to start, but there's no reason that this couldn't be something more custom for each team, each league.
Right. Well, we'll definitely have you on again in the football season. I'm
Yes.
assuming you're going to get a little further along, so you can tell us where we're at
Definitely.
then and promote some more. So
Definitely. And I just signed up to have a booth at the Fantasy Football Expo that's going to be in Canton, Ohio, August 15th. I'm going to have a booth, and I'm also a breakout presenter. So just finished that today. That just got announced earlier this week, and I am on the schedule.
Congrats.
You're the guy.
That's exciting.
That's the Hall of Fame game, or is that?
It coincides with something called the King's Classic, which is a major draft that happens every single year in Canton, and they're having a Fantasy Football Expo. They had one 2 years ago. They didn't have one last year, obviously,
Right.
And so now they just announced that they're going to be bringing it back. So it's way in the mid. Ohio is the home of football, right? It's actually the home of fantasy football too. So you go there, and they're having an expo where a lot of the major fantasy analysts are getting together and having an expo. So yeah, excited for it.
That's awesome. That is great. Congratulations.
Yeah, thanks.
Well, let's transition to the rest of it. And Cola's going to stick on and give us his insights with college basketball. We've had him on before for the tournament, and so obviously this week is the big conference tournaments this weekend. But we're going to do kind of a little bit of a preview of the NCAA tournament, kind of in a global sense. We don't have the field yet as we tape on Thursday. This is the 11th, so Selection Sunday is on the 14th. So let's first go over our weekly action index here. So actually, you want to go over your top 15 and any kind of exciting changes that you see on here?
Nothing really changed at the top. I did see that Ohio State has taken quite a bit of a hit lately. They've dropped down to 10th in the rankings, and I think largely due to their defense or lack thereof. And beyond that, I know we touched on Purdue last week. They are steadily rising up there, now 13th in my rankings, which I think is similar to Ken Pom. And I touched on it before, but there's a lot of Big Ten here at the top.
Yeah, the Big Ten is dominant, but I like the bottom. I like San Diego State out of Mountain West is on there. Colorado's on there this week. So there's a couple guys at the bottom. Those are some of those teams that I kind of like in the tournament at some point. And then obviously you've got the teams we've talked about in Illinois. My Illinois squad is playing great at number 3 now, jumping Michigan. Maybe they were up there last week, but they've been pretty consistent. I don't know, do you see anything out of this, Cola, that you like? Maybe you haven't seen this every week. We look at it every week, so we get used to it.
Yeah, I liked a lot of the ones that you mentioned. Illinois, I really like them. San Diego State definitely has piqued my interest here. They're one of the most experienced teams in the nation. They play really tough defense and they run people off the 3-point line. Their opposing 3-point percentage is among the lowest in the nation, so I really like them. What you said about Ohio State, yeah, Ohio State does not have it right now. Their defense is weak and they're too small. Like if you look at the team, like their effective height on KenPom, it's abysmal. They just got dominated against Michigan. They've lost 4 games in a row. You know, it's the fact that they can still remain in the top 10 is almost like people saying, yeah, the Big Ten is really tough, but not necessarily. Like, it has to be. They have to have a better team. You know, they have to win some of these games, and 4 games where they were favored by KenPom. All 4 of those games, even against Michigan, they were favored from the KenPom projection. Even though that game closed 2.5 points for Michigan, that's not what you would find right now if you went on to KenPom. So, you know, a team to lose at home and then stay in the top 4, like that's incredible to me. And team to lose 4 games in a row and stay in the top 10. You know, it just seems like it's more like people saying how great the Big Ten is and not necessarily Ohio State. So I'm really, you know, down on Ohio State's long-term prospects of like Final Four. I just don't see it.
For sure.
Unless they got like the perfect plum draw of a team that doesn't have a really good teams that don't have great offenses or major inside presence. Like they would have to get a really, really favorable draw for me to think they could make the Final Four.
For sure.
One thing that I've wanted to point out before we move on from this is on the real KenPom, Wisconsin is at 10. And
it's incredible. It's incredible.
I just don't understand it. Any insight there?
I honestly sat here today. I have KenPom here right behind my camera, so I'm looking at it right now. It makes no sense. They've lost 5 of 6 games. They haven't beat a really good team in like forever. They did beat Loyola Chicago, so that was way back in December 9th. You know, maybe they're getting some bonus points for that. It almost feels like the way that they play just kind of rigs the KenPom system with their very, very slow tempo. They have a very arduous pace, and that brings up their efficiency, but it's not resulting in wins. So yeah, that one I just don't understand at all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sometimes it's accumulative from the season, you know, and that's all I can say. It's not like it's the last 3 weeks or 4 weeks or 5 weeks, which we kind of have to, you know, as pickers or whatever, as bettors, we have to know the trend. But I agree with you. I mean, they did play well against Iowa once Wieskamp got hurt, but they, you know, but that they were getting smoked before that. So
right.
I would like to point out the Action Index has Wisconsin at 25. So.
Oh,
KenPom action. Yeah.
Well,
but KenPom they're 10th. So
I know.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
Well, let's go over last week's. You know, we always like to toot our own horn, Colo. This is our second week in a row we've dominated. So this is we went 7-2 last week. We were red hot even with the Friday day action, I should say. St. Louis came through for you. Action, of course, they lost on Saturday, so hopefully they're out of the tournament. Then your trees, the Sycamores, came through for us. You know, they covered the 5 points against Evansville. And then your Boilers, I mean, boiler up, man. This team is balling. We could talk a little bit more about them in a minute, but they beat down Indiana and covered for us as well. The other one that covered Illinois, we already mentioned. Memphis did cover. That was one of my darling picks. I thought they could have won that game. They kind of almost got to overtime there in a bank shot.
Yeah,
and then Baylor did, the bank. And then the Baylor flexed their muscles, and you mentioned Michigan State. The 2 ones we missed, Iowa, you know, we just mentioned that. Well, they didn't cover that's right, because Wieskamp, right?
Yep.
And then West Virginia, you know, my West Virginia jersey I'm going to burn after losing to Oklahoma State twice.
Yeah, that's right. 2 in a row. Cunningham and the Cowboys got him again today in the tournament. So.
Yeah. I mean, that guy's really good. But I do still like my Mountaineers. They're a good ball club, but not against Oklahoma State.
Is that one of the most incredible results? The fact that Oklahoma State beat West Virginia without Cunningham?
Yeah. That's.
I mean, I don't know how they did that.
it just, I mean, that when we were talking about teams that like have really perked, I mean, they have to be one that is just making everyone look. Let's take a second look at them. I'm really interested to see how they play tomorrow against Baylor. That's if they beat Baylor, I mean, you got to really, they're going to be shooting up boards, even though they're not shooting up Ken Palm. I mean, they're in the 30s still. But,
yeah, it's kind of interesting. I was mentioning to Action before the podcast that it's acting like a little bit of like Syracuse with Carmelo Anthony or something. Score, and then the rest of the team's good complimentary wise. They just needed that push. We'll see. And the Big 12 is such a good league, so they're going to be ready for the tournament.
Right.
We'll find out. So we don't really have the spots this week since it's such an interesting week with the tournament, the different conference tournaments kind of happening in real time. But I know Action's got a lot of futures on here. But stop me when you want to do this. We'll start off with your ACC since you already got a future on this team. So some of these highlighted teams, obviously North Carolina last night whooped up on their competition last night. But you like Georgia Tech, and they have been playing great. They're rising up the ranks in KenPom.
Yeah, I played a little bit on Georgia Tech pre-tournament, and this one at 20-1. Just thinking that there's some value on that side of the bracket with their expected opponents, and just like that, Miami beat Clemson, and then the Yellow Jackets beat Miami this morning. So they'll move on to face Virginia in the next round. And I did see that the scoring guard Alvarez, I think is his name, picked up a little injury today in the first half, but he returned to lead them to victory over the Canes, and they'll take on Virginia tomorrow.
Right. One of the disappointments, and we've got Cola with his jersey over here for the YouTube watchers, he was wearing his Duke jersey until apparently the game got canceled because of one COVID test, which is a bummer. They had a couple wins to get to today. They're supposed to play Florida State. So sorry, Cola.
I was wearing it because of that information.
So just out of curiosity, were you liking the Blue Devils against the Florida State Seminoles today with that number +4?
No.
Oh, okay.
No. I mean, I like Control deleted this season like a long time ago. I opted out of that season at the same time their star player did. I love Duke. I really do. But, I can tell it I like it is. When I was on in 2019, I told you guys that Zion was not going to make the Final Four as badly as I wanted him to because of three-point shooting. So, I love Duke, but I got to be real.
Mm-hmm. He's a realist.
One other spot I'm looking for tomorrow, assuming that North Carolina gets by Virginia Tech tonight, I am already lining up North Carolina as an underdog against Florida State tomorrow in the semifinals. I think that their interior rebounding has been phenomenal the last couple of games, and I think they'll give the Seminoles a run for their money.
Yeah, they can shoot the basketball. That team, I mean, they had 25 offensive rebounds last night or something like that. They have so much length. They're just playing volleyball on the rim and the backboard. I agree. I mean, that Florida State team is pretty strong too, but they seem to be they haven't been the same since their COVID pause. It's definitely a different team. I was going to mention Syracuse. Of course, they got beat today, right? But they kind of need to win some games to get in the dance. I think they're going to make it. It's going to be right on the edge, but there's not a lot of teams. ACC is down this year.
No doubt.
Now, do we like any of these teams, in the tournament itself? You like Georgia Tech to make a run in the tournament itself, or you North Carolina, or is this just kind of a stay away league for you guys?
Cola, I'll defer to you.
I am right now. I don't see anything. I think that the way that Virginia plays, they can always catch a team or make a bit of a run. Just any time that a team plays such a strong defensive and difficult defense to penetrate, you're going to be able to catch teams that haven't seen that before. But I don't think that anybody in this league is really somebody that I'm excited to put a dark horse, Elite Eight or Final Four or anything like that. Nope.
I'll concur with that. I don't think any of these teams really have the moxie to make it far. I mean, Florida State always surprises teams, it seems, in the tournament. But I expect they'll have a higher seed this season, so maybe more difficult to make that run.
Yeah, early in the season, I was all on Virginia. I thought this was another year because they had enough offense to go with that defense. But they've consistently kind of sunk in the ACC, which I think is down. So I'm not on board with them as deep as normal. And same with Florida State. I love Leonard Hamilton can coach college like nobody's business, but I just think the level of competition is low. So when they face some of these better teams, I think it's going to be tougher for them.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's talk about the Big 12 now. We kind of already talked a little bit about it. This is one of these, just like the Big 10, I think those are the two kind of cage match tournaments where these games are just going to be insane. We already mentioned West Virginia going down to Oklahoma State, but I mean, hell, even Kansas State played pretty well today against Baylor. I mean, even these bad teams are pushing the good teams. There's going to be probably 7 teams out of this league in the big dance. It doesn't look like you have. You said you had a future on Oklahoma State, right?
No, I don't think so.
Oh, okay. So I don't know. In this league, obviously Baylor's the class of the team. Cola, if you haven't been listening all season, Steve has been, winning a lot of money with Baylor, but I've gotten him a couple times of late, pushing against Baylor because they covered the first 17 games of the season.
Yeah.
Wow, that's incredible.
I actually jumped in on them in the second half today. They're winning by like a bucket and laid the points in the second half, which did not come through. Kansas State nipped them.
Mm-hmm. I mean, the big fade, as I kind of mentioned via the earlier before the podcast, was Kansas's big man is out for this tournament with COVID. So we'll see. Should be back, I hope, next week when they play the big tournament. But I kind of like the way they were playing on the stretch. Especially, I mean, it was at home a lot, but I mean, I'm assuming you guys like Baylor deep in the tournament itself, the big dance. So are there any other teams? I mean, I'm a West Virginia guy, but are there any other teams that you like besides this Oklahoma State team we've talked about?
I think that Oklahoma is another dark horse, assuming that they're going to get into the tournament. I'm not sure that they're solidly in the field, but I would imagine that they have a good case. And they've played some good basketball this year. They have a scorer in their own right, and Brady Manick on the inside as well. And Oklahoma and Coach Lon Kruger usually come to play in the NCAA tournament. So I'll be looking at them in probably an 8-9, 7-10 type of matchup.
Yeah. What about you, Cole? Anybody you like?
I mean, we talked a little bit about Oklahoma State, and I'm really interested to see what they're going to do against Baylor. I mean, if they hold tight with Baylor, I think that they're going to be projected to get a decent seed, and people are going to be really excited to, kind of mirror this team. We talked about Carmelo Anthony, but a lot of times these teams don't end up being like Carmelo Anthony. They are more like the Michael Beasleys or Kevin Durant's. When you're held by one star, it's a lot harder to make those big runs. But that's what really perked me up about them beating West Virginia without Cunningham, because if they have enough of a supporting cast to be able to overcome a 10.5 point underdog role without their star player, that was a surprise. It makes me think that maybe they do have enough of a supporting cast to make a deep run.
For sure.
Yeah. The other thing I wanted to just say, I know you said, yeah, of course, Baylor. We all love Baylor, and I do really, really like Baylor. One thing that I found really, really interesting when I was digging into some of the KenPom numbers is that if you look at the top 20 teams or so at KenPom, none of them really stand out as a defense that creates a lot of turnovers. It's really, really interesting. You see a lot of the blue color when it comes to turnover creation. And I thought that was really interesting that Baylor is number 3 in the nation. So you see a lot of these defenses that are the really high efficiency defenses on KenPoms. They're more of a pack it in, play really strong defense, have a low effective field goal percentage, but you're not seeing the ones that, run and jump the way that a lot of defenses that cause the havoc are set up to do. But Baylor does have that. Another thing that you're not seeing some of the best teams do is shoot really high percentage 3-point. And,
right.
Baylor has been out of control from behind the 3-point line, 42%. And so, you get hot like that and you can't beat Baylor if they're just throwing in 3-pointers, time after time. And they have enough of a all around game that they don't just rely on either of those standpoints. So Baylor is great.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Action loves the guards, and guards usually win in the tournament. I will say with the defense, pre-COVID, this team was, top 5 in both categories. They've kind of faded in some of the metrics for defense. So I'm just, we saw them get well. What day was that? Sunday or maybe Saturday? They had a get well game, but today scared me a little bit. But let's see how they play against the better teams, like you said, Oklahoma State, and then maybe they can roll it right in. They're definitely going to be a 1 seed, and we'll see their draw.
Can I make one more? Oh, sorry.
I was just going to add on to Baylor. The one thing that concerns me is their offensive rebounding that they allow their opponents. They're near the bottom of Division I, 282nd ranked, giving up 31% of offensive rebounds. So that is something that could definitely come back to bite them in the tournament.
Mm-hmm.
They snatch the ball from them so much they don't even take that many shots, though, you know. Anyway, I was just going to make a big picture comment about the metrics. Fundamentally, if you just think theoretically, the metrics on KenPom this year are not as they're not as correct as they have been in years past.
Sure.
How many times in these conversations have we already talked about COVID pauses, players being out, missed games, long absences, like all of these things really affect the teams, and the computers can't know these things when they're adjusting for, you look at the spread with Io DeSuma and without on, it adjusts when he didn't play against Michigan, even though they still beat Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
But on KenPom, it doesn't adjust, right? So all of these things, it can't account for these things. And we believe that these COVID pauses, they impact the players, right? So I think that this tournament is going to be the most where human factors are going to matter more than they ever have, because of what it means to not only the numbers, but then also those players that are in Indianapolis trying to do everything they can not to get a positive test, and they're going to be in that environment for 3 straight weeks. I mean, think about, like, I'm just saying, like, it's hard to predict, but to think that there are going to be some weird results in the tournament, it seems like it's a certainty, more than normal.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Agreed.
Yeah, some of those metrics, we usually look at KenPom, but look at the net rankings where Colgate's number 9, right? They played 4 teams, and they might be good. I mean, they can score. I saw them score 105 points the other night, but apparently they only played 3 teams 4 times each or something.
Right.
But that's different on KenPom, but it's you got to be careful of those metrics.
Yeah, I looked up the net today and I was like, huh? Like, what? Am I missing something? But anyway, a good point.
Let's go to the Big East now. The Big East, obviously, I think it's a little bit down. I don't think they're going to have that many teams, but there are a couple great, really good teams. Villanova did get knocked off today in this tournament, which really helps Action's future, which is on UConn, which we talked about last week. Want to tell everybody again what you got on them for this tournament?
Yeah, the Huskies plus 400, which will pay out 4-1, and they're playing tonight against Providence, I believe, and then likely.
I think it's
DePaul. You're right. My bad. Upset there.
Oh yeah. I mean,
walk over. And then the big game in this tournament is going to be UConn and Creighton tomorrow. Likely is going to decide who will win this championship.
Well, what do you think about Creighton?
To be honest, they had some issues of their own with Zagorowski being out with an injury for the better part of a month. They were flying before that injury, and ever since his return, they just haven't quite been the same team. And now, as many of you probably know, their coach is in the hot seat for some comments that got him suspended last weekend. So I think there's a lot of turmoil in this locker room, and I'll be looking to fade them at every turn that I can.
Yeah, a month ago I was all over them. I mean, we predicted the Villanova upset, or maybe it was an upset, but they covered against Villanova at home, and then they obviously got beat down. That was the week of the McDermott stuff that was happening. And Villanova, it's just sad because they were playing really good basketball. I was kind of turning into them, and then with Gillespie getting hurt, they obviously are going to be damaged down. I mean, they'll make the tournament, but they're going to be an early out in the big tournament, I think, too. So, this whole division, besides UConn might be the only guys that might make Sweet 16 out of this group from what I can see right now.
Yeah. I think the opening round spread for Villanova is going to be fascinating. I mean, the seed line certainly will be interesting, but you could see them open up as like an underdog, as a 5 or a 4 seed in the NCAA tournament.
I think they were supposed to be a 3 seed as of like last weekend. So, but I mean, will they factor in the Gillespie injury? They must, they probably should, but you're right.
Yeah, it'd be like Minnesota versus Middle Tennessee, right? That was the 5 versus 12 where they were the underdog.
Yeah,
that's right. Well, let's go to the Big Ten. This is, and we all live, in this range, and we love these guys. And this is the ultimate cage match where there's probably going to be 9 teams that make the NCAA tournament out of this one. We've already mentioned how we like Illinois. Looks like Action has some play there, but he's also got his Homer shirt on with the Boilers. So tell us about your futures in this one, Action.
Well, put a lot of thought into this. Obviously, I think that Illinois is the favorite to win this title, and it didn't really reflect that in the odds. So I'm thinking on that side of the bracket, some really good value with them at plus 375. And then on the top side of the bracket, you've got Purdue in the bye spot there, who will go to face Ohio State now in the quarterfinals tomorrow, a team that we have beaten twice this season. And
who's very tall.
That's right.
Purdue is very tall.
And we played.
What did I just say about Ohio State?
We play some defense too in Boilermaker land.
Yeah.
So add that into the fact that Eli Brooks, the do-it-all point guard for Michigan, rolled his ankle on Sunday. Doesn't appear that he's going to suit up in this tournament. I think that taking a shot at Purdue at 12-1 was some good value on the top half.
All right. I agree with you. What do you think, Cola? Obviously I'd love to get that value like Action, but besides Illinois and Purdue, obviously Michigan's a good team. What do you think about Iowa though?
I think Iowa kind of has that same kind of Iron Man. Luka could just go to town and just take over this entire tournament, right? The last time that he was in this tournament, Iowa was a 10 seed and they took Tennessee into overtime. A really strong Tennessee team. So he was already trying to play that Iron Man role there. And I just could see him do that same thing. I still like Illinois the best. Again, I'm putting a lot of stock into these games where the teams are able to really play high level basketball without their stars and without DeSuma against Michigan. They were 8.5 point underdogs. They were able to come out and just get one of the head scratching wins. They shouldn't have been able to do that, and they were. And then Iowa comes back and against Ohio State just puts them on his shoulders. These kind of game changing players. It's what I think is going to be really impactful in the tournament this year, and that's what Illinois and Iowa both have, those type of players that can just absolutely take a game over and just decide they're not going to lose that night.
Right, and I think too with Io, you've got Coburn inside, right? You've got Frazier who can score, and then the kid who came off the bench, and I can't remember his name, who stepped in for Io, played really well in that Michigan game, and that's the value, right? Those guys stepped up. They have confidence now. They can go deep. I try not to get too excited because I've been on the Illinois bandwagon many times and been crushed, usually in the finals. But no, I think they're good for this tournament. But any of those teams on the top 4 teams there they're going to be really good in the NCAA tournament. So how about any of the other teams that are, should make it? Michigan State probably will make it. We've debated this a couple times. Looks like the Terps are going to make it now. Do you guys in general with the tournament, do you find that those really deep leagues with teams that are the 8th or 9th team in, are those teams you target in the tournament, or you just say, hey, they either got beat up too much or they're overrated because the league gets so much shine?
I think the Big Ten. I think the Big Ten is one of the top leagues, and I think that all of these teams that make it to the tournament are going to have a serious advantage over the next 3 weeks because of the uncertainty that surrounds all of this. These are the teams they're in Indianapolis now today, March 11, and presumably are going to be in the same hotel room for the next month. So I personally am going to be looking at putting Big Ten teams far in my bracket across the board for the most part, save Ohio State probably, and Wisconsin. But I think, even like down to Maryland, this is a team that has a lot of moxie, and I expect that they could make a run. I could see Sparty making a run too if Aaron Henry gets hot.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that take. The other thing that's going to be really interesting, again, we're talking about a tournament that's going to be unlike any other tournament, and that's the seeding. So some of the things that would impact where a team is going to go that's geographical just doesn't even matter. They're going to be straight seeding this, but they're also going to be trying to keep all of these Big Ten teams away from each other so that they're not playing. There was only 4 games in the Big Ten that were canceled due to COVID, And so the amount of time that you played another opponent impacts where you can play and how soon you can play another team. So you're going to see this really help the Big Ten in that they're going to be spread out around the bracket, and you just know that Iowa and Illinois are probably not going to be in the same bracket they're not going to be in the same bracket as Michigan, and they're going to have to somehow spread out Purdue and Ohio State and all of these teams. There's only 4 regions, to spread these teams out. So I think it really helps that you have so many Big Ten teams, and that geography has nothing to do with where they're going to get placed. It's all about keeping them separated.
Mm-hmm. How about you?
I like that point about the geography, because in the past years that 4th, number 1 has to go out west if they're an East Coast team or something, and don't have the fan backing. It's all the travel, but it's different this time, and they're giving them a little bit extra time with starting the tournament a day later, and so getting people in position.
Right.
It will be fascinating. It's going to be amazing.
Right, and that geography also won't they'll seed up and seed down like they have in the years past, or some of these seeds that don't make any sense. They're not going to be able to say it was because of geography or things like that. So
right,
interesting.
I have one more nugget, Wags, before we move on from Lucas Oil Stadium. I saw the pictures come out of the setup for this Big Ten tournament in Lucas Oil, and immediately thought to myself, this is the worst shooting backdrop that I've ever seen.
Really?
It came to fruition. I told Wags this morning, I've been blindly betting the under in every single Big Ten game as soon as it opens. And sure enough, every one of them takes money to the under. And we're now, with the final, Indiana and Rutgers, we're now 4 out of 5 games that have gone under full game, and many of them in the first half as well. And I expect that trend will continue tonight, tomorrow, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday.
What's the setup? Did they do the half, or what did they do?
Yeah, it's set up half perpendicular to the football field with the curtain on one side, but the stands are a good 40 or 50 feet behind the baseline on each side.
Ooh,
and there's no lighting, so there's no background to the rim. And the 3-point shooting has been atrocious.
Huh. Yeah. Well, aren't they? That's how they're going to do some NCAA tournament games like that, right?
Correct.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's usually how the Final Four is. That first half of the Final Four is usually abysmal shooting, unless the team is just, incredible. But you just have this whole clang fest, and that's what you're probably seeing right now. I haven't been able to see a lot of the games yet, but yeah, it's those big venues, they never work quite right.
Mm-hmm. In fact, for the tournament, I believe they're going to set up 2 courts on either side of the curtain, not to play simultaneously, but I imagine to do like offset, similar to the NBA in the bubble.
Right.
It's like the rec center in college.
Yeah.
You got the 2 games, the ball. All right, let's go over the last conference, the big conference, SEC, and obviously it doesn't look like you got any action on this one, but obviously the big teams that we know in there, Alabama and Arkansas, have kind of risen to the top, but there's a couple other teams that could make some noise here. I mean, you've obviously got Tennessee that played really well early in the season. They just kind of cratered, and then you've got LSU, who always can score. So it'll, they're going to score. Mm-hmm. Can they stop anybody? Who knows? But no. But I like Arkansas this conference. I've been saying that for about a month and a half now. Alabama obviously has been really good, but I just think Musselman's got his team playing really well. I like them in the NCAA tournament, and I would like them. I don't know what. I'm sure they're a little bit of plus money. I'd like them in this tournament.
Yeah, I think I read plus 300 before the tournament, 350. Alabama and Arkansas were right neck and neck. So I think that's a good pick. We've talked about it this season. Unlike other Musselman teams in the past, they're actually playing defense. So that's always a good thing when you get to March, no doubt about that.
Mm-hmm. And how do you think this league will fare besides those top 2 teams? You got any other teams that you think might do anything in the tournament, or you just kind of like an ACC situation where it's not as good as, without Kentucky, it's kind of weird that not have Kentucky, and obviously Auburn was ineligible anyway. Mm-hmm. It's just and Florida isn't that great this year. It's kind of a different year for the SEC.
Yeah, I'm really down on everyone, even Florida. I think the only 2 teams I'll be looking to advance might be Arkansas and Alabama.
All right. Any thoughts, Cola? He's like, I don't care about the SEC.
Yeah, I don't have anything in particular. I will definitely be looking for some matchups that make any make any sense because I do think that we're going to be seeing some weird outcomes. So these weird outcomes have to come from somewhere, right? So there are going to be some teams that we don't expect to knock off and make a deep run when you didn't think they were going to. So no one offhand jumps out for me other than those top two, but seeing what the matchups are and how the teams play, I could see, someone like, I'm not even going to throw a name out, but I could see it, but I just don't have anyone that really jumps out other than Arkansas and Alabama.
I will add, you touched on LSU. They are on number one on my fade list. I think there's probably a 90% chance I'm going to pick against them in the first round.
Right.
Now, I didn't know if that was the end of the conferences that you're going to go through. I didn't know if you were going to touch on and talk at all about Gonzaga.
Well, we'll talk about them for sure. I want to touch on these last two. I forgot that we have two more on here, but they're smaller, mainly because Colorado State is on one.
Yeah, put that
but you already talked about the Mountain West a little bit with San Diego State. I love them for the tournament. I love them for this tournament. My alma mater, Colorado State, has to win. I think they're going to get in, but we'll see. They got to play probably Utah State, and that'll be the big game for them to win. Boise's in that bubble as well. So there's a lot of bubble teams in these two conferences here in the American. So I don't know. You guys don't have to weigh in on Colorado State or those guys, but you guys do like the Aztecs. You think they're a pretty good squad to get deep?
I do think that they're set up. They've been just on a tear recently. They're experienced. They, like I said before, they play really tough, efficient defense across the board. A lot of these efficient defenses are because of their effective field goal percentage, but they also do the offensive rebounding or avoiding their opponents from getting offensive rebounds. They also turn people over. So if you look across the board, you're not seeing a lot of really well-rounded defensive teams. It's more that they have a really slow tempo and they limit, the effective field goal percentage. But, creating the turnovers and then also limiting offensive rebounds is something that the Aztecs really do well, and they don't get hurt by opposing 3 points. They're the 3-point shots. They run the other team off the 3-point line. And so I like the way that they play. I like the way that they're set up.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I like Colorado State, and I didn't tell you this, Wags, but I was interested in looking at playing them on the futures in this tournament because I think they're very live to get to the championship, and we've already seen them beat San Diego State once this year. So instead of playing them pre-tournament, though, this is another one where I was eyeing up a mechanical parlay where I'm likely going to put one unit on Colorado State tonight to win on the money line and then just take those winnings and roll them over every day and hope that I can beat out those plus 500 odds. And, we touched on this earlier before we jumped on, but the loss of Duke today in the tournament really got me to thinking that the mechanical parlay might be an advantage this season, because if you choose a team and you put down some money on a future in the NCAA tournament and they get a COVID positive case, they're out and you could potentially lose out on that money. And the alternative of taking it game by game allows you to secure that cash and not necessarily have it on the line in case you do run into that situation.
Right. I will say to that, Matt Norlander and Gary Parrish did an emergency pod today to talk about this particular Duke incident. And their belief is that the protocols that are in place should avoid a team from completely being eliminated from the tournament once it begins. The fact that you have to have 7 straight days of negative tests, the way that they're implementing the technology to ensure that the players are going to remain, away from each other a certain distance, and they're doing the contact tracing and all of that. If there was a positive, of course you can lose a major player. And again, like you're saying, then you're able to pull out on your parlay or on a future on a team. But, they're basically saying that the likelihood of a team getting completely swept out on this is not likely. And also you're able to play 5 players. So I know some of the leagues said you had to have 7 or 8 or however many it was. But the tournament, you can go 5 and play the entire game, Ironman it. So
that would be epic.
They don't believe that you're going to lose an entire team once this thing starts.
That's good insight.
Yeah, that's good to know. The last conference we'll just touch on is the American. There's a couple of teams here that are going to make it for sure. It looks like Wichita will make it, even though they're terrible in KenPom. And then you've got Houston, who I do like. They're in the top 10. I'm a Memphis guy. I really wanted them to upset Houston the other day to get that big win. They're going to be on the bubble the whole way. But you see Houston making a deep run. I mean, their metrics are great.
I love Houston. I mean, they are one of the top defensive teams in the nation, but top 10 on offense too. And you don't normally see that out of a Kelvin Sampson team. So I think this is a team that's going to be undervalued likely by the public once you get into that game by game betting and you see those lines come out. It's definitely a play on team for me.
Right. Do you think they're going to get respected on their seed? They're not going to get bumped to like a 3 seed?
I think it's probable that they'll end up on the 3 line, to be honest, but I'm not sure that really makes a difference in this tournament. 2 versus 3.
You definitely don't 4 and get matched up with the number 1 seed.
I think it'd be highly unlikely if they drop to a 4, unless they lose tonight. It's always a possibility.
That's true.
Right.
That's true. Well, we'll go back around to Cola's point. Let's talk about Gonzaga, and I do want to talk a little bit about BYU. I watched that game the other night, and the Zags are really good, but Action's already been on record on Twitter many times that he's fading the Zags. So, what's your position on Gonzaga this year?
I mean, the big guy inside, Tourney, is a hell of a player, but he has not faced top tier big man competition this season. And can you imagine Drew Timme going up against Coburn or Luka Garza in the paint? Eat him for breakfast. I think that
You mean Harms wasn't big enough for you? That was the Flying Dutchman, your former Purdue Boiler.
Harms went off to Provo for a reason, Wags. It's because he couldn't hang it in the Big Ten. And I'm telling you that I don't think Gonzaga is going to make it very far. You might see them in the Final Four, but I'm looking to lay a heavy price that they won't win the title.
Okay.
So that was exactly what I was going to say. I do not see Gonzaga winning this championship. You look at their adjusted efficiency and it's like sky high over everyone else.
Right.
It's like leaps and bounds. Right now it's 37.4 and the next one is 31.7 for Michigan. But the way that they play and the way that they haven't really had, they're coming back and saying this BYU game, they needed it. They needed the test. They needed to get pushed. But, but you need to get pushed by a team that can actually beat you.
Right. No
one thought that they were going to lose that game at halftime, even when they were down by that much. I mean, again, going to Matt Norlander put a question on Twitter that said, what do you think is going to happen in this game? And the most at halftime, how do you think this is going to turn out? And the most popular answer, 37%, was they're going to win by 6-10. So, I mean, people didn't think that they were going to lose, and I'm sure that Gonzaga didn't think that they were going to lose either. So, I don't think that they've been pushed, as much as you want to use that. Someone would want to use that as kind of like the narrative. I do think that I was really surprised to see that their 3-point shooting percentage wasn't just off the charts. It's something like the mid 50s. You expect Gonzaga, like that's the way that they play, right? They just throw in 3-pointers, and that's actually not the way that this team plays. The other thing that I thought was really interesting is if you take the top 30 teams of KenPom and you just look at the tempo, every single one of these teams is doing the slow, methodical game. But Gonzaga is not like that. Okay. Right. Gonzaga is actually 4th in the nation in tempo. And when you see these two styles play against each other, the one that usually frustrates the other is the methodical playing against the really quick tempo team. And so estimating that Gonzaga is going to have to play 2 or 3 of these really strong, methodical, slow-paced games, I just don't think that they're set up to win 3 games like that, 3 games where they have to play outside of their style. That's probably my biggest thing. And then also just I say the human factors, like the fact that having to be there for 3 weeks, and even if Matt Norlander went on a podcast today and says, I don't think a team's going to get completely outed from the tournament, you still have to imagine these guys are sitting there every single day knowing that we're the number 1 team in the nation. We're the one that everyone thinks is going to win. And if I screw up and I get positive, then I can't play. And I think this kind of stuff is going to wear on them more more, and this is for everybody, but I think the very top teams, it can wear on you even more. So, I'm usually the numbers guy, and I'm the one, I'm an engineer just like action. And but I honestly think that the human factors are going to be so much more present and impacting in the games this year.
Right.
I would like.
Well, I guess what I would say about the Zags, I mean, I didn't get to see him play a lot this year, but I did see him play in that BYU game. I mean, I do like Suggs. I think he's a really good player, but he's a freshman, right? So he's not that pedigree, senior guard, junior guard who's going to really come through in the clutch. He did play great in the second half in that game. But I don't know. The other thing that I look at with the Zags is, I'm not saying maybe you don't espouse this theory, but it's kind of to your point. They're undefeated. So it's the pressure of being undefeated. We've seen this many times. Even Kentucky, that great Kentucky team with, Karl Anthony Towns and stuff couldn't get it done. And that team was better than this team, right? I think. So it's just hard. It's hard to have that pressure on you. And, Wichita State, I remember a few years ago when they got beat by Kentucky in like the second round. That could happen here. So I think those two factors are going to work against them. I just, we'll see how it plays out. They're a really good squad. So
Wags, I got a question. Cola touched on the halftime spread against BYU. They were down 12 points. Did you think they were going to come back and win at that moment?
Well, BYU was shooting, I think it was like 60% or something that first half. So that was impossible to maintain. I thought that it could be when they made that one bucket, I think they tied it with 4 minutes to go. I said, okay, maybe they have enough. I knew that because I hadn't seen Gonzaga play all year. So I was kind of like, wow, their defense isn't that good. That's what I was saying the whole first half. I mean, BYU was throwing in shots, but they were penetrating the lane. They're penetrating the baseline. I'm like, where's this great, defense? Second half, boom. So the first 10 minutes of the second half, I mean, they only scored, I think they only scored 25. BYU scored 25 points in the second half. Yeah. They scored, 60 in the first half or something, 57 or something. So I thought they were going to probably come back to win. I just thought that it would be just complete shootout. Instead, they flipped the switch. And so we'll see against an inferior team. And BYU is a good squad. They're top 20. Ken Palm, but to Cola's point, I mean, they're not when they face some of these big boys, Travion Williams or Purdue or something, or like you said, Kofi, Coburn or something. I mean, they're going to be in a world of hurt inside. If they get Timmy in foul trouble, what are they going to do?
Yeah, I for one I think I had Gonzaga in the first half, which was obviously a loser, and then I saw they were laying 11 in the second half, and I almost fell out of my chair trying to get that wager in, as I'm sure half of America was too. So. I bet it was 100% to 0 on the bet splits for that second half.
Yeah. So to your question there, I'm looking at Ken Palm right now, and they had the win probability at 50.8% for Gonzaga. So again, the computer said it was 50-50 at that point, but again, the computers don't know as much information as this year about what's everything that's going on with the world and with missing players and things. So.
They do have a couple of good wins. Auburn, West Virginia, Kansas, and Iowa all come to mind. But, I mentioned Garza. I think Iowa had the complete wrong game plan. Trying to run with Gonzaga is not the way to beat them, to your point.
When Iowa's defense is not great. Yeah. So, I mean, and that was early. And again, we talked about it last week on the podcast. Besides on Monday or Tuesday when they played BYU, they hadn't played anybody good for weeks. It's just – besides BYU since December, and it's not their fault, it's their league, but this is what happens every year.
No doubt.
Right. And they have the longest wait to actually play another game.
True.
And I feel like this has always affected them. They've moved their game back a little bit. It used to be the Sunday that every other major conference would end their regular season. That's when Gonzaga would play those games, and Wichita State, they would have those time slots to play theirs, but still they have a long way until they play their next game.
Sure. Good point. All right. Well, let's wrap up the episode with the big Vegas update. We're going in a week. A week from now, we'll be there, hopefully winning money. Action injured his dice finger. I don't know what's going on.
No.
I need to.
I forgot to tell my story.
Call in a specialist.
So,
my!
I was reaching in the bathroom the other day to grab some scissors, and my hand got sliced on a razor blade. I don't know if you guys can see it. Can you see it, America?
Not really, but this is tragedy. I mean, we have the last 2 times I've been there with action. I don't know if you know this story, Cola. The first time I went to Vegas, really for real, being down on the Strip with my first night, this guy rolls for an hour and a half and wins, 10, 11 G's at the craps table. I was like, this is amazing. I love Vegas. And then the next time we went back a year later, it was during COVID. I happened to be distracted. Big mistake on my part. Action's texting me, hey, I'm on a heater. 2 hours at the table, winning 19 G's. I mean, this guy can roll the bones, baby.
They're definitely epic nights, and
That's incredible.
I can't imagine that'll ever happen again, Wegs, but we'll certainly try.
How about Wednesday? How about March 17th or 18th? Either day.
I gotta stick my hand in a bucket of Vaseline and get it cleaned up here.
Yeah. So anyway, we got 4 guys strong going down to the desert on Wednesday through Saturday, but we're going to be at Stadium Swim on Friday at noon Pacific time, I guess it is, till 5 to watch those tournament games on the opening day, which is going to be super exciting. We decided to kind of figure out what we're going to do on Saturday, but if you're in the area, we have so many listeners. If you're, hit us up on Twitter or whatever, we'd love to see you, meet us out there. And obviously everybody would like to see action get hot on the tables again. But I'm looking forward to putting down some big wagers out there.
Oh, yeah. Can't wait. It's going to be awesome. Maybe Cola will join us next year.
Exactly.
Yeah, maybe.
To get his Final Four cozy.
I've got my koozie. I was at the most recent college basketball game, so
that's right.
I was commemorating it with my koozie.
Awesome.
Minneapolis. So proof that they actually did play this tournament a couple of years ago.
Yeah, it's certainly going to be a celebration bigger than I can ever remember for college basketball. After we lost the tournament last year, I think all of us are just ready and waiting for this thing to kick off.
Absolutely.
To put in context how long ago that was, I touched down in Minneapolis for the Final Four. I went to my brother-in-law's house, and we just had a small gathering for gender reveal for my 3rd child. My parents were there as well. So a girl, 3rd girl, very exciting news. And so now that baby is 18 months old. It's like, that's how long it's been since we've had a tournament, is that I went from gender reveal to 18-month-old baby girl, and we had no other basketball. So
that's crazy to think
about.
Basketball. That is crazy. That's crazy. Well, Cola, one more time, why don't you tell us about the eFantasy YouTube channel and then where to find you on Twitter?
On YouTube, eFantasy.football is the name of the channel. You can search hashtag eFantasyFootball to find it. On Twitter, at eFantasyShowman. Also, landing page, efantasy.football. Check us out. The games are up. You can see what we're talking about. Every single week I do a little bit different tweak of what the game will look like. Just trying to see how we're going to do 2021. Thank you guys so much for having me. I love talking college basketball. I really appreciate you giving me the chance to talk about eFantasy football. And I'm very much wish I could go to Las Vegas with you guys, because that is going to be a banger.
Well, we'll be back. We also go to the opening week of the NFL season. You're welcome to do it. We're trying to do a big thing for that this year too.
You guys need to draft a team in the FFPC. I'm going to be there. I'll be there because I won my way back.
Nice.
Won my league, won 7 Gs on my fantasy football league that I drafted last year in Vegas. So you guys need to draft a team. Come on.
All right, let's do it. Well,
let's do it.
Thanks for coming on. That was a great experience and introducing our listenership to eFantasy football. That was awesome. And we look forward to having you back on future episodes.
That's right.
Thanks, guys.
Well, thanks, Cola. And follow us at Side Action Pod on Twitter and also on YouTube. And then follow me at Wegspool on Twitter and Instagram.
And follow me on Twitter at 31sroberts.
All right, everybody. It's tournament time.
Let's get it.
That's a wrap for this episode of the Side Action Podcast. We appreciate all of your listens, and thank you for joining us. We'll see you all again next week on Thursday for some more hot picks and side action. Side Action Podcast, its owners and associates take no responsibility for the opinions or statements made by the show hosts or their guests. Statements or show topics are not necessarily the beliefs of this podcast, and opinions between talk show hosts may conflict. Individuals following the advice given on the podcast accept their own risk of losses from wagers made, as the Side Action Podcast, its owners, hosts, associates, or guests will not guarantee any advice given. The opinions and advice given on the Side Action Podcast is for entertainment purposes only. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Intro and outro and transition music credits. Song titles Jerry 5 and District 4 by Kevin MacLeod at incompetech.org. Licensed under Creative Commons Attribution 3.0. creativecommons.org/licenses/by 3.0.